David.
Morning. And maybe more relevant to this, I'm old enough, because I don't look very old, but I'm old enough to have been the Foreign Office Minister responsible for the Soviet Union before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I keep thinking back to those days, the dilemmas that were faced then, and dealing with an altogether more difficult and tricksy character than Putin, because in the old days, you knew what the Soviet Union was probably going to do. With Putin, what's he going to do? Nobody knows the answer.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? And it would seem like the only game that our politicians here can play in this is a commitment to the long term, isn't it?
Exactly. But also, how do we, in the short term, how do we bring this to an end? Putin obviously feels that he cannot survive the Soviet Union, Russia failing to take over and win in Ukraine. So the question is, though, at what point does a lot of the BS he comes out with about nuclear weapons, at what point does that become a reality? It's a very, in the old days, we used to think of MAD, mutually assured destruction, and there's still an element of that.
But isn't there, because obviously there are concerns about what relations there may be and what sort of joint operations between Russia and China in relation to this. China's made it clear that they don't support the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
No.
Now, is that going to actually be important in terms of moving forward?
No, in sitting out there and trying to think about what one could say that was of any use compared to what everyone else has been saying on it, I think the key element in this is China. I'd love to say it was the Archbishop of Canterbury's intervention, but I don't think so somehow. I'd rather he told us what God's purpose is in all of this and try to be a sort of amateur diplomatist. But where we have a situation that really matters, Russia was very keen on its relationship with China. China, they're wise enough to know that they cannot attach themselves to Russia without the greatest risk of being dragged down into the swamp as by Putin's last despairing attempt to stay out of the mud. But you see, China could be very useful here, because if the Chinese wanted to launch a sort of little peace process, that would be good for their international reputation. But also, it would be difficult for Russia to push them away. Someone has got to find a basis on which a deal can be brokered. Otherwise, this thing is going to go on. Many more millions of people are going to be affected, not necessarily killed, but badly affected. I mean, the economy of Ukraine has been destroyed, and the economy of big chunks of Russia also. Putin plainly is not capable of really determining a sensible course. If the Chinese were to say, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, I think that would probably be the only new card to put on the table.